Good morning, Shana Tova. You're welcome to close your machzor, take off your shoes, fluff your pillow. This is going to take a while. When someone has suffered a trauma and you come to bring comfort, the best thing to do is just to remain silent. When you come to the house of Shiva, when you come to the hospital bed, when you sit with that friend, the very best thing to do is not to chat, but just to sit quietly and listen. And I had thought very seriously that maybe what we need this year is not some sermon, but simply 10, 15 minutes of quiet meditation on what this year has brought and how this year has changed us and how this year has changed the course of our experience and our history. But you know, if a trauma comes as time goes on, and particularly when you come to the yahrzeit, to the yearly anniversary, the heart changes. And words that could not be said at Shiva, we find them at yahrzeit. Stories to tell, ways of understanding and interpreting what has happened to us. And that's what this year is for. The yahrzeit is Monday night and Tuesday, Sunday night and Monday. We remember all that has befallen us this year, and now we can begin with the distance of about a year to try to figure it all out. So today we talk about America, and on Yom Kippur we talk about Israel. When I was young, I learned Jewish history, or at least a version of Jewish history. I learned that ours is a history of persecution, exile, oppression, hatred, and exclusion. My little blue machberet, my Hebrew school practice notebook, had a drawing of Maimonides on the cover, but long before I knew who he was, long before I delved into his genius, I knew the names of all the destroyers. Pharaoh, Haman, Nebuchadnezzar, Titus, Torquemada, Chelnitsky, the Tsar, didn't matter which one, they were all bad. Hitler, Himmler, Heydrich, Goering, Goebbels, Eichmann. I remember my 7th grade geography teacher was so excited to introduce us youngins to the glories of ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon, of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. By 12 years old, I already knew those places because I knew everything that they had done to us. We learned our history, but we learned it from a distance because we were certain that we were immune. We were shielded by the two great miracles of the Jewish 20th century, the establishment of the State of Israel and the flowering of American liberal democracy. We learned Jewish history, but we learned that that history was behind us. Well, almost. In spring of 1967, the armies of 5 Arab nations mobilized on Israel's border. Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran, choking off Israeli shipping. Nasser expelled the UN peacekeepers. Abba Ibn, the most civilized Jew alive, stood before the civilized world heroically, stood before the United Nations and pleaded for an international response, but there was none. We prepared for another catastrophe. In every generation, they come for us, teaches the Haggadah, Bechol Dor Vador, Omdim Aleinu Lechalotenu. And then suddenly, in the first week in June, Israel rose up and did what Jews had not done since the Maccabees. They attacked, they fought back, they won, and when the dust cleared, Israel was many times bigger and Jerusalem once again ours. Mima Amakim, from the depths, our redemption came. The Sunday of the war, my parents picked us up early from Hebrew High and drove us to the Hollywood Bowl. The Jewish community had called for a rally. 40,000 people showed up. Frank Sinatra sang the national anthem. Barbara Streisand sang Hatikva. The governor, the senator, the mayor, every Hollywood star filled the stage. Even the Hollywood stars who had changed their names and hidden their Jewishness stepped forward to declare their solidarity with Israel and the Jewish community. For us, this was no ordinary military victory. This was a sign. Now we knew for certain that the vulnerability and the helplessness of Jewish history was behind us. It was a revelation that changed our identity. We were no longer destined to be passive victims. We were redeemed people, protected, if not by a providential God, but by the Israeli Air Force and the shelter of America's power. After 1967, we became visible. We began seeing kippot on the streets and hearing Fiddler on the Roof on supermarket Muzak. It was only after 1967, only after 1967 and that victory that the American Jewish community gathered the psychological wherewithal to confront the Holocaust. Up to then, it remained a whispered family secret, but in 1967, we found the answer. The response to the Shoah. Never again. Never again would we be powerless. Never again would we be victims. Never again would we be the objects of history, characters in someone else's hateful narrative. And never again would we wait for God's salvation. In 1967, we decided that if God's not going to save us, we will assume God's responsibilities in the world. God creates, so we will create. And we launched the most furious program of institution and community building in all of Jewish history. We built synagogues and seminaries and schools and summer camps and community centers and museums and fraternities and defense organizations and communal charities, all fueled by the most effective network of communal philanthropy in American history. God rescues, so we will rescue. There were millions of Jews trapped in the Soviet Union, subject to cultural genocide, and Jews in Ethiopia dying of starvation, and Jews in Yemen under mortal threat. So we took up the tools of Israeli sovereignty and American democracy, and we used our power to liberate them. Jews, God promised us a homeland, so we committed to build Israel. The cultural and religious institutions, its schools and universities, its hospitals and social infrastructure. My tiny room at the Hebrew University had 6 plaques on it. Inside the door, outside the door, on the bathroom, over my bed. Each one from a joyful donor who said, I have contributed. My $2 in dimes in a little J&F card planted millions of trees and built reservoirs and waterways. My bar mitzvah Israel bond, which I still own, provided millions in capital for the Israeli economy. And AIPAC ensured that America would never ever abandon its commitment to Israel's sovereignty and security and freedom. It was all unprecedented. It was unprecedented in all of our history. No community had this kind of power. No community enjoyed as much freedom, acceptance, affluence, influence as American Jews in this past century. This was a golden age, the American Jewish century. And then came October 7th. If we thought that we were exempt from the agonies of Jewish history, on October 7th, Jewish history came back with a vengeance. The two narratives of our Jewish lives were violently shaken. Israel wasn't invulnerable after all. The intelligence services failed, the army failed, the government failed. And here in America, the institutions of liberal democracy that we so trusted betrayed us. The media, the universities, ecumenical institutions, social justice organizations, the allies that we had so conscientiously supported over these generations turned away, or worse, they celebrated the terrorists. Today, even a year later, we are still unsettled and feeling alone. Is this the end of the golden age of American Jewish life? Is this the end of the American Jewish century? Perhaps. But some of us feel that we must fight on because there is so much that was accomplished, so much that is precious from this century. In a few weeks, just a few weeks, my favorite movie will come on television. It's a Wonderful Life. You know the plot. George Bailey faces a crisis and is ready to throw himself off a bridge when he meets Clarence, an aspiring angel who fulfills his wish to see the world as if he'd never been born. That in itself is worth a sermon. But let's go to the very end, the very last scene. A chastened George Bailey returns home to find the bank examiner and a police officer ready to arrest him, when all of a sudden, the whole town shows up to save him. They crowd into the Bailey's living room, and we see their faces. Every culture and faith, rich and poor, native and immigrant, black and white, all gathered into one supportive, loving community to remind this everyman, this common, ordinary schlepper, that he's extraordinary, that he's a hero, that he matters. There are no Jews in the movie that I can remember. And with Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed gathered around the family Christmas tree, singing Auld Lang Syne, it's very vanilla. But it's a very Jewish movie. The story and the screenplay were written by Jews. The director, Frank Capra, was an immigrant from Sicily who closely identified with the Jewish experience. His first movie was an autobiography about an immigrant featuring a Jewish immigrant in his role. The producer was Capra's business partner, Samuel Briskin, president of Cedars-Sinai Hospital and Temple Israel of Hollywood, where today the day school is the Briskin Elementary School. And by the way, It's a Wonderful Life was filmed a half a mile from here, where Lake Balboa is today. That was the RKO Ranch movie set. So yes, you are all sitting in Bedford Falls. It's a Jewish film. It's a Jewish film. George Bailey is, after all, a moneylender. But in this story, he's the anti-Shylock. He's beloved because he built the community, gathered in his living room. This diverse community of cultures and languages, races and faiths testifies that George Bailey gave us our home, because George Bailey is America, and America gave us our home. It's a Wonderful Life is the picture of the America that we wanted America to recognize and reach toward. It's a celebration of a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-faith, multi-racial America where people of every background and origin and station support and care for each other. We American Jews, we projected that image, that ideal into the American consciousness. In this century, America did more than welcome us. America invited us to shape its values, articulate its aspirations, and in so doing, America allowed us to create a uniquely American expression of Judaism. We shaped America, and America shaped us. Most Jews have never heard the name of Horace Kallen. Horace Kallen, a Jewish immigrant from Prussia, graduated Harvard in 1903, a classmate of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and was the first Jew invited to teach at Princeton University. When he was at Harvard, Horace Kallen was invited to join one of the Brahmin fraternities on the condition that he give up everything that made him Jewish. In response, he authored a revolutionary interpretation of American liberal democracy. He said, in Europe, national identity is a combination of ethnicity, culture, language, and faith. National identity is in the blood. You're French because you were born in France, speak French, eat French, worship in the French National Church, and follow the manners and ways of French culture. A German is born German, speaks German, behaves German. America, Kallen argued, America is different. In America, there are many ethnicities and languages and cultures and religion. No one need give up their national culture and identity to be an American. America is, in his words, a symphony of civilizations. Horace Kallen invented the hyphen. So we are Italian Americans, Polish Americans, Korean Americans, Jewish Americans. It is in the mingling of cultures, he argued, that gives America its unique dynamism and energy. The best exponent of Kallen's ideas was Louis Brandeis, the first Jew to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. Asked once whether one could be a loyal American and a Zionist, he famously responded, quote, "Let no American imagine that Zionism is inconsistent with patriotism. Multiple loyalties are objectionable only if they are inconsistent. A man is a better citizen of the United States for also being a loyal citizen of his state and of his city, for being loyal to his family. Every Irish American who contributed to the advancement of home rule in Ireland is a better man and a better American for the sacrifice he made. And every American Jew who aids in the advancing of Jewish settlement in Palestine, even if he feels neither he nor his descendants will ever live there, will likewise be a better man and a better American for doing so. Loyalty to America demands that each American Jew become a Zionist, for only through the ennobling efforts of that striving can we develop the best in us and give this country the full benefits of our great inheritance. Brandeis argued that Zionism intensifies our Judaism and makes us better Jews. And when we're better Jews, we're better Americans, because we have more to contribute to the American symphony. This interpretation of American liberal democracy changed everything, changed the conditions of Jewish life. Just consider three implications. Number one, when we lived in the ghettos of Europe, we were isolated, but we had pride in who we were. Then came the Enlightenment of the 18th century, and soon after emancipation. Europe said, come out of the ghetto and join proper society. But the price of admission is that you must give up all your Jewish distinctiveness. The price of acceptance in European society is the sacrifice of your culture, your language, your faith. To live with us, said Europe, you must give up what is distinct about you. But America was different. Unlike Europe, Jews in America are not forced to choose between integration and distinctiveness. On the contrary, America expects us to hold onto both. The dynamic of American Jewish identity is all about finding the right balance. Sometimes it's tense. Do you allow your kids to go out on Friday night, or insist that they come home to the family Shabbat table. Sometimes it's ingenious. I can get a kosher hot dog at Dodger Stadium and join a Mincha Mariv minyan during the 7th inning stretch. Sometimes it's a little subtle. Ever attended services in a European synagogue? Good luck. Good luck finding it, and good luck getting in. And here we are, right on Ventura Boulevard, with a giant sign welcoming you to high holiday services. We put up Hanukkah menorahs in the mall, wear kippot and stars in public, talk openly of our Jewishness. We walk the public space of American civilization, visibly Jewish, and we expect the society about us to respect us. We are the most visible Jews who ever lived, and we take that completely for granted. We take it for granted because we've internalized it. This never happened in Jewish history. Jews were never allowed to be this visible. But this degree of acceptance and inclusion is the first gift of America. Second, for most of our history, we perceived ourselves in exile, waiting God's redemption. Wherever we were, it was temporary. Our bags were packed, waiting for the Messiah. Next year in Jerusalem are the last words of the Pesach Seder and the Yom Kippur service. When we prayed for rain, it wasn't rain here, it was rain in Israel. When we marked the season, there weren't the seasons here, the seasons in Israel. So when we entered modernity and aspired to become citizens of the lands where we live, they asked us, is your home here or there? Is your loyalty invested here or elsewhere? But America was different. On this bima, on the bima of the synagogue, right beside the Holy Ark, in the most sacred spot, in the most sacred space, are two flags, the American flag and the Israeli flag. America gave us a new sacred geography. We no longer see ourselves living in exile. America is our home, and our homeland is Israel. Home and homeland, both are sacred. We belong to both. We live here, and our history lives there. Our story embraces both. When you go and visit Israel, it feels like coming home. First time we went to Israel, I was a kid. We went as a family. And everywhere we went, people said to my parents, leave the kids here. And believe me, they were tempted. But it's not as strange. It's not as strange as it sounds, because there's a palpable sense that this was home. And it still feels that way. It still feels that way. We began the 20th century with no home. And we ended it with two. One is home, and one is homeland. Third, at the dawn of modernity, the Enlightenment in Europe asked the Jew a question. Literally, Napoleon asked this question of the French Jewish leadership. Who are you? A human being or a Jew? Is your principal loyalty to your people or to humanity? Which takes precedence? Your particularism or your universalism? And there were so many who were so embarrassed by their Jewishness, a Jewishness they saw as narrow and parochial, they gave it up to become citizens of the world. And there were so many others who were so appalled by the amorality of modern society, they turned away, they turned inward, giving up on the world and isolating themselves in mystical spirituality. But America was different. America is built on an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal and endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights. That's our idea. We brought that idea to human consciousness. Asked in the Talmud, what is the most consequential verse in all of the Bible? the Rabbi Shimon ben Azai said, Zez Sefer Toldot Adam, from the 5th chapter of the book of Genesis, on that day God created the human being. God created the human being in God's image. The radical truth at the heart of American democracy is a Jewish idea. All human beings are created equal. All reflect the Creator's image. All are precious. All deserve dignity. It is no accident that every 20th century American movement to expand the horizons of equality had Jews at the center. Samuel Gompers organized the American Federation of Labor to give workers a voice. Joseph Pulitzer taught journalists how to defend democracy. Emma Lazarus inscribed the words on the Statue of Liberty that welcomed millions of immigrants. Lillian Wald and Henry Moskowitz joined W.E. Du Bois in founding the NAACP. Jack Greenberg founded the NAACP Legal Fund alongside Thurgood Marshall, and every Jewish child knows the picture of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marching in Selma, Alabama, alongside Reverend Martin Luther King. Harvey Milk led the LGBTQ community out of the closet and into the public space. And the women's movement, the movement that liberated women, was inspired by Betty Friedan, led by Gloria Steinem, Letty Cotton, Pogrobin, and championed by Bella Abzug and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And there's so many more. It's no accident. Ask any Jewish child, what's Judaism's highest ideal? And they will answer immediately, Tikkun Olam, the repair and healing of the world. The ultimate expression of Jewish particularism, of our distinctive Jewishness, is our universalism, our responsibility to the world. It comes from the very beginning. Abraham was chosen by God and commanded, "V'nivrchu b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama," the families of the earth will be blessed through you. You're to be a vessel of divine blessing in the world. And you're to do so as a Jew, from the heart of your particularity, so that you will respect and protect the particularity of every family, every community, every culture, and the unique preciousness of every individual. That's what God sent us into the world to do. But only in this generation, and only in America, did we have the security and the agency and the opportunity to fulfill this commandment and teach it to our children. Are you a human being or are you a Jew? America taught us to answer yes. American liberal democracy gave us this golden age of Jewish life. But today it all feels so insecure, so shaky, so unsteady, because America is infected with a powerful strain of pessimism and cynicism about our democracy, which emanates from the extremes of the political spectrum. The far right sees our democracy collapsing. They detect dark forces conspiring to subvert American values and poison our communities with strange ideas and foreign ways. The far left believes that the entire American project was a lie from the beginning, that the rhetoric of equality and democracy was a ruse, a ploy put forward by a conspiracy to advance structures of power, privilege, and patriarchy. And the only thing that these two factions agree upon is that we Jews are at fault. So the far right marches with torches in hand, chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and the far left builds encampments on college campuses calling for global intifada. And we tremble. Jewish history, it seems, has come for us after all. There is an arsenal of tools for resisting anti-Semitism, tools of legislation, law enforcement, education, advocacy, media. We should deploy every one of them vigorously and support the agencies and organizations that do that work. We must remain vigilant to these threats. But anti-Semitism, this anti-Semitism that surrounds us, is a symptom, not the disease. The disease is the widespread loss of faith in American liberal democracy that breeds these conspiracy theories. God knows there's plenty in America that deserves criticism, that calls for repair, that calls for healing and mending and fixing. But it's a far cry from asking America to live up to its promise than to announce America is sick, America is dying, America is ending. What's most frightening is how contagious this is, metastasizing so quickly from the political extremes into the common culture. So much that is hateful, so much that is illiberal, so much that was once taboo has become normalized, socially acceptable, endorsed by those who should know better. It is almost impossible to dissuade someone who believes a conspiracy theory. You ever try to talk to these people? Even if all the facts are entirely arrayed against their story, believers only hear what confirms their theory. You treat a conspiracy theory like you treat the outbreak of an infection. You isolate it. You inoculate all of those who are not infected and slowly hope the infection will fade. To treat this contagion of pessimism and the conspiracy narratives and the hate that grow from it, America needs an infusion of renewed faith in liberal democracy. In all of human history, there has never been a self-governing, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multiracial society that sustained itself for any length of time. Countries were built on blood and soil. No one ever built a country on an idea before, especially ideas as radical as equality and liberty. We claimed that these were self-evident truths. We're the only ones who thought so. A country based on blood and soil draws the loyalty of its citizens from their common origin. A country based on an idea claims the loyalty of citizens from our vision and our common aspiration of what we can become. A country based on blood and soil is bound together naturally, biologically, like a family, and can always regenerate itself out of that soil. But a country based on an idea is built on a compact, what we call a covenant. In the brilliant wisdom of the Hebrew language, the name for this country is Artsot Habrit, the land of the covenant. The covenant that must be renewed and reaffirmed in each generation, exactly as we're doing today. In our tradition, Rosh Hashanah is the renewal, the reaffirmation of the Brit, the covenant that unites the Jewish people, binds us to our faith, to the faith of our ancestors, and to their vision of a holy people and a sacred community. America needs a Rosh Hashanah, because America is also a covenant, and it too requires that every successive generation renew that covenant, reassert loyalty to the vision and the ideals of the founding. More than ordinary patriotism, more than waving the flag and singing the anthem and rooting for our guys at the Olympics. Today, we desperately need a renewal of the American covenant and its vision. And we, who have taken so much from this country, who have learned so much from this country, who have benefited so much from this country, We hold that responsibility at our hearts. And we know how to do it. We know how to do it because we did it before. Frank Capra, the Italian immigrant, and Sam Briskin, the Jewish communal leader, made It's a Wonderful Life in 1946. The war was over. We defeated Nazism and totalitarianism. Thousands of Americans were returning home from overseas, thousands more returning to more normal life. The question was, to what America were they returning? During the Great Depression, just before the war, there were many who doubted the future of American democracy, many who actively opposed it. What was the America to be after the war? So Capra and Briskin set about showing us an image of our best American self. Bedford Falls, where folks of all cultures and races and origins support and care for each other. A community animated by a sense of shared destiny. People whose lives were interconnected, who depended upon one another. A community where the common man is a hero because he lives his life in a fabric of relationships where lives touch lives, where lives uplift lives. It wasn't real, of course. In 1946, there was ample racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and every other kind of prejudice in this country. But Capra and Briskin knew we needed to be reminded, not of what we are, but of what we could be, of what we fought and died for in Europe and the Pacific, of what America aspires to become. American liberal democracy, they knew, building and sustaining a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic society is a long and arduous and frustrating process. In 1946, Capra and Briskin wanted us to know that it's worth the struggle. It still is, because it's wonderful. It still is a wonderful life. Shana Tova.